The Naked Truth Report is sponsored by Kathleen Wells on AM 870, The Answer.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome to the Naked Truth Report, my truth warriors and mythbusters. I mean, let me say, hasn't this last week, isn't this like a fabulous time to be engaged with politics? I mean, it's so dynamic, it's so dramatic, it's so invigorating. It's like so much is going on that we've never experienced before. I mean, this is like we're entering like a new frontier on the political landscape or something like that, right? I mean, this is just so fantastic. I want to talk about two things. I have a guest today, and I'm going to bring my guest right on. He is a constitutional conservative. I'm going to bring him on, but I just want to mention a few things because so much has been going on. One of the things that I want to mention, in fact, I just saw on my Facebook a picture of the Democrats during the State of the Union. I mean, that was like, was that the most, particularly the Congressional Black Caucus? They had on their kente cloth. I mean, that's like symbolism. I mean, that's not, having on your kente cloth is not like something you can sink your teeth into. You know what I mean? There's no meat on the bone. There's no substance there. This is this is what I'm thinking. If black folks are still voting Democrat after that episode, after witnessing that episode, and black folks are still voting Democrat after seeing that. And if you have friends that didn't see the State of the Union address, show it to them. I mean, I'm sure it's on YouTube. Show it. When I don't care how you feel about Trump. When he says the unemployment rate for blacks has decreased, the highest ever. And even if that's not accurate, I mean, even if he can't take all the credit, the issue is this. Why was it ever high from the get-go, from the beginning, when blacks have been voting Democrat for 5 decades? So why is, black unemployment in double digits for decades? Why? And so even if it came down a little, that's better than what it was before, you dig? So I don't understand why people are like, why they want to say that, Trump can't take credit. Whether he can take credit or not, blacks have been voting Democrat for 5 decades, and the black unemployment rate has been high. So those Congressional Black Caucus members should have recognized, applauded. They should have recognized, right? But they're sitting there, sour face, all of them. I mean, they look so angry, so disgusted, so what is the word? Ejected. That's not the word I want. Rejected. So, dejected. Thank you. So dejected. So, I mean, they were just so like angry. We just came off of 8 years of Obama. And they're so stingy. They're so negative of spirit that they can't withstand 4 years or 8 years of Trump. We had 8 years of Obama. And Obama averaged 1.8 GDP over those 8 years. Trump is like doing fantastic. I think the first 3 quarters, he's 3% or a little over 3%. Why? That's because he cut regulations and he cut taxes. And also, it's also his how do I want to say, the way that he's, what is he expressing to the global economy? His style, the way he's approaching it. Just his whole style, his whole embrace of the economy, what he presents to the global economy is different than Obama. In fact, I was reading, or I saw something to the effect that Obama borrowed a lot of money, and spent, borrowed and spent. And the whole global economy sort of like freezed up. You know, fear to do anything, right? Freezed up. They didn't know what to anticipate. All that borrowing of money and spending. It didn't rub right with the global economy. So, Obama averaged 8.8 over those 8 years. So these stingy Congressional Black Caucus folks, these stingy Democrats, this is another reason why no one should vote Democrat. Because these people, it's like they're children. In fact, some of those folks were playing Candy Crush or something like that. In other words, if they don't get their way, they're like sourpuss, sour face, if they don't get their way. That's like so immature. How can they do it? They're so immature. They are immature. They're an empty suit. They're just symbolism. There's no substance. There's nothing you can sink your teeth into. There's no substance. So anyone, 5 decades of Black Americans voting Democrat, and where are we? Look at the data. Look at the data. And I've gone over, everyone knows I'm a data girl. I've gone over the data 1,000 times, every show. 228 years for the average Black family to catch up with the average white family, right? During Jim Crow, we had 80% two-parent families and 40% of our businesses. For the past 5 decades, we only have 25% two-parent families and 7% of our businesses, right? This is another thing I say, and I say it all the time. Any parent that puts foreign kids over and above their own children and grandkids' future is a bad parent. I mean, these are just like the fundamentals to living. This is like life 101. It's so disturbing to me. That was very frustrating to see the Democrats. I just felt, what is the word I'm looking for? It's like I felt like, oh my God, if another Black person votes Democrat after this, they have screws loose. They can't put 2 and 2 together. I mean, all you have to do is go to any liberal blue city and see what has evolved. Detroit is out of the park, right? Look at Baltimore. And all these Black politicians, all they do is talk about racism. That's the only, and that's another thing. Have you noticed they're not talking now about this memo, right? That's like above their pay grade. They can't even talk about stuff of substance, intellectual substance. All they can do is scream and yell racism. Everything is racism. And you know why I don't have any respect for these folks anymore. I've stopped having respect for them years ago, right? But now, my grandfather was born in 1895. My grandfather was born in 1895, and my dad, and I said this before, my dad always told me, he sent you to law school. So how was my dad able to send me to law school being born in 1895? My great whatever was born in 1808, and she wasn't even a slave. See, this is the thing that we have, the media, that's another thing that the media and the school system, they're not teaching the truth. They have an agenda that they're pushing to keep Black America at the bottom. Trump said we shouldn't even call these folks, these kids, they're illegal aliens. They're not dreamers. Because Martin Luther King said he had a dream about what? Black kids and white kids holding hands that are American citizens, not foreign kids. So we shouldn't even call them dreamers anymore, right? But anyway, next week I'm going to talk, what I found out is that they're going to be dispensing 5 more memos. So I'm not going to talk about the memos, the memo that was disclosed Friday. Was it Friday? I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm going to talk about it next week because there are going to be 5 more. They're going to disclose information on the State Department. And I mean, we're going to find out a whole bunch of stuff. And all this stuff has to do with the Constitution, right? This is the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. Is it the Fourth Amendment? Yeah. Search and see, wiretapping someone, surveillance. We as American citizens, hey, listen, the Trump team, those are hey, guess what? They're American citizens. They're private American citizens. And they were being spied on. American citizens have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And if you're going to spy on someone, you got to go to court and get a warrant. When it's FISA means it's Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So this person has to be you have to have probable cause, and the person that you're spying on, you have to show that they're acting on behalf of a foreign agent, and they committed a crime that was in violation of U.S. law. So like I said, I don't want to get into it now because I'll start getting into it. I'm going to get into it next week. But we're going to bring on my guest right now because he's, what he is? He's a constitutional conservative. Wow. That's something new for me, right? Because I'm a new conservative, right? So he's, and he knows the Constitution backwards and forwards, and he's going to inform us about the Constitution. Right, Keith? His name is Keith Hardine. Hi, Keith.
Hey, well, I hope I can meet your standard.
You're definitely going to meet my standard. This is Keith Hardine, who's a constitutional conservative. Keith, why don't you tell me what a constitutional conservative is?
Well, there are so many different interpretations of so many things nowadays. We live in a morally relative society, a postmodern society. That is our culture today, which means that we have pretty much abandoned the principles of the Declaration of Independence, let's put it that way, as they describe the natural law. In the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, it talks about the laws of nature and of nature's God would determine the separate and equal station to which people would assume. In other words, what that means is that you and I have a separate and equal station. Separate but equal, just like what they talked about with the, I think it was Plessy versus Ferguson. But the whole idea of that basis being natural law, that is the grounds, in my view, of what a conservative really is. They understand and they embrace, they sort of, they take on, they adopt the Declaration principles, as Lincoln said. Let us readopt the principles, the practices, and policies which harmonize with the Declaration. So if our policies, politically speaking, harmonize with the principles of the Declaration of Independence, that is what I believe a conservative, and that is my own definition. Of course, there are people who will give you a different one, but I believe that's what a conservative is. Now, a constitutional conservative is one who additionally follows the Constitution. And the Constitution, of course, is based on the Declaration of Independence. That's why I put it in that term, and that explanation is that the natural law, the laws of nature, are the basis for all of our constitutional laws. And of course, that is biblical as well. And so many people today, being sort of, what do you call it, pragmatists and relativists, they will dismiss the Declaration of Principles, meaning natural law, as a divine demand or divine command. They dismiss that whole idea. So does that make sense to you?
Yeah, a little bit. So in other words, when I'm in law school, they're telling you that you learn rather that the Constitution is a living and breathing document. And you believe that because it's just sort of like, makes sense. It's, life is a progression and evolution. And so it has to evolve. This is what you reason, that the Constitution has to evolve and, develop, progress the way life progresses, right? But now
if they wanted it to be an evolving document or a living document, they wouldn't have put the possibility to amend it. You look at Article 5, and you can amend the Constitution. So the proper way to do it is to follow the procedures of the Constitution itself, instead of trying to amend it yourself or say, say a politician like a president, say President Obama, you know, he amended it himself by giving edicts and orders, you know, that were unconstitutionally done. He cannot make law. The executive does not make law. That is the legislative.
Right.
But
wait, I just
powers.
Right, but I want to just wait. I just wanted to finish my thought, because I was saying that that's what I initially was trained in law school to think that, but it's sort of counterintuitive, because the 14th Amendment has now been devolved into, initially the 14th Amendment was to apply to the direct descendants of slaves exclusively, but now it has devolved to where it applies to illegal immigrants, midgets, and, lesbians and all this stuff. So this is why that's counterintuitive. This is why I now believe that strict construction, one should be a strict constructionist with regards to the Constitution, because Black direct descendants of slaves have seen the degradation or the negative impact of having their amendment, which was supposed to apply specifically to them, applied to other groups, and it is to our detriment. So I now believe in being a strict constructionist.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do. Then you'll be a constitutional conservative.
Yeah. I'm a constitutional.
As I explained, this is my definition of it, and anybody can dispute it if they want, because again, we live in a relativistic society, and there will be people who say, "Oh, well, that's your interpretation, or that's your view." Just like truth, the idea of truth, that there are absolute truths, and yet people will say, "Well, that's your idea of truth, or that's his idea of truth." And so they're relativists. But everyone should know, we all know that there are certain truths that are fixed, absolute, cannot be changed. Just like the weather. We can't change the weather. We have no strength, we have no ability or authority or power to change nature. Nature is as God created it.
But how do you know
God
that you're
has only the power to suspend nature.
But how do you know you're interpreting it correctly? Do you understand? How do you know your interpretation of the Constitution is accurate?
Good question. Here's what I do, and this is basic English 101. You look at a paragraph, or when you read into it, whether it's a contract or some type of, or an essay or any type of reading or literature that you read, you always read it in the context of the writer. So you look at what the writer has written, and you read it in context. You don't add to it. Your view. You read it just as the writer intended in his writing. And then you can also look at other writings that the same writer wrote, and then look at those writings and see what the writer is thinking on the same subject, or whether it be, like, for example, in the Founding Fathers' sense, we have the Declaration of Independence. We have the Constitution of the United States. We have the state constitutions and the preambles. We have the Federalist Papers, which are essays that were written to explain the meaning of the Constitution. You see, we have that. And then we have the writings of the founders, the primary documents that they wrote. And these documents, like the Northwest Ordinance, there are certain consistencies that you read in all of these documents. That's why it is required reading and teaching in the LA Unified School District, which they do not do necessarily, or at least spend a considerable amount of time doing. So that's why I said we need to go back and start reading and look at these documents, read them in the context that they're written, and compare the notes, and you'll see a certain consistency throughout the teachings of the founders.
And in fact, when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that you felt that the founding fathers were what? What did you say again?
The founders. Well, let's put it this way. Well, let me give it to you like this: that slavery, and you hear this today. Though slavery and racism were both terrible problems, and that we understand. In early America, there were terrible problems. The charge that the U.S. Constitution, and this is what we hear many times today in the Black community, the charge that the U.S. Constitution institutionalized slavery and still demeans Black people today is a lie, in my view. because and the founders, just because some of them had slaves. Yeah, we can name them. Yeah, those are those men that had slaves and wrote these documents. We're going to say that we excuse or dismiss the principles that they wrote in the document and saying, well, because they had slaves, they are invalid in their views and in what they wrote. I mean, it's invalid, it's obsolete. I don't think so, because those documents contain principles that were higher than the founders themselves. They were greater than those men. See, what I mean by that is the laws of nature and nature's God, as I said before, are higher than any man because they have to be coming from a higher source of supremacy, which is God Almighty. And that's where we always fail, is because we leave out, we dismiss the divine element of natural law. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit. So let me ask you a question. You were saying something to the fact that let's see. Oh, you were saying the fact that, wait, I lost it again. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I can't find it. But the thing, because we were discussing, when we discussed this earlier, what were we talking about? Ooh, you said the founding.
In general, we're just talking about the founders and how they, how they were accused, at least today. We see how they're accused so much of being racist, and basically oppressive against blacks, and they excluded.
Oh! Now I found it. Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about the 3/5 human beings, remember 3/5 of a human being. Explain that to my audience again.
Yes, you want me to explain? Yes, in the 3/5 clause, the 3/5 had nothing to do with the worth of the individual as the person. It's kind of like if I attack you as a person, and yet dismiss what you're doing. Well, let me put it this way. I think this is very relative, and people won't like me for this, but watch this. President Trump, he's got a lot of haters, a lot of people that don't like him, even some that call themselves conservative. See, again, there that is. But they don't like him because of the tweets and because of what he says and because of some of the things he says and some of the things that, in some of his appearance, the way he looks. But you never hear them criticize his policies. Why not? Because the policies match the principles of the Declaration and Constitution. His actions, since he's been in office, have been an action that has expressed the Declaration itself, that all men are created equal. Because what he is doing is, he's building up the Declaration principle that all men are created equal by doing those, counter executive orders that Obama has done that were unconstitutional. So I think that's a good way to explain it and put it in the context.
Also, for instance, the executive order that Obama executed for DACA, exactly. Yes. That's an example that we can.
Yes, perfect example. I mean, look what he said. He's willing to give them even more than what they, he's willing to give the 700,000 DACA people, I won't say kids, but DACA persons, he's willing to give them and an additional 1.8 million, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he added that and said, I'll give you that.
No, but yes. I'm talking about Obama did the executive order for DACA.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Obama did the executive order initially.
Right,
so
right.
That started the whole ball of wax, and that just made things, that divided the country. It was very bad.
Because
yet,
there's no.
It went on.
Yeah, because.
And so now we got stuck with all of these people, if I could put it this way. We got all these additional people because of DACA, which was unconstitutional because the executive does not make law, and yet he did, and yet the Congress did nothing. So now Trump comes along and says, I'm going to put it back in the hands of Congress. I'm going to take it out of the hands of the executive and put it back in the hands of Congress. Isn't that kind of a humble thing to do? That doesn't sound to me like a fascist or tyrannical thing to do. It's quite the opposite.
Right.
So he's recognizing where his authority is limited. Right. He's saying, I'm going to abolish what Obama did unconstitutionally by executive order, just as he did the executive order. So then he says, I'm putting it back in the hands of Congress where it's supposed to be in the first place.
I
And
think
so I'm going to add to the DACA 1.8 million. So the Democrats don't even like that. So it exposes them to say that they don't really want to, say provide citizenship, a pathway to citizenship for these people. They don't really want that. All they want are voting blocks.
Well, yeah. I mean, that, I was talking about the State of the Union and their behavior at the State of the Union. It's very clear to me, and probably to all people with a reasonable mind that was viewing that the Democrats merely want to retain power. They don't care.
Right.
They're not principled. They don't have integrity, because even if you don't agree with something, if someone is doing something good for your constituents, because us Black Americans voted in those Black politicians, so we're their constituents. So if something is being done for your constituents, even if you don't like the person doing it, if you have integrity and if you're principled as a person, you will see it as a good thing.
Now let me share something with you, and you tell me if you think this makes sense. I always like to do this because I want to make sure that I have clarity. Like my friend Dennis Prager says, clarity above agreement. Sometimes people don't agree, and that's fine with me. But be clear as to where I'm coming from. It's a power move by the Democrats. They want to, get more people into the country. That's the idea. Get more people in the country. People who may be not necessarily rich, but people into the country so that they would vote Democrat. That's bottom line what they're trying to do. So if you think about in the days of the founding, the 3/5 clause, going back to that, the South wanted to retain its slaves and then expand its slaves even further north. They wanted slavery to expand. Not to contract, but to expand. So they wanted more power and more representation. So they were willing to count their slaves as, even though their slaves were property, and as being, qualifying for representation in the legislature. So the North said, no, you can't do this, because the North saw what they were doing, and they saw that they were trying to get more power to themselves. So here's the same pattern. And these are Democrats as well. So we see the same pattern today. Democrats have always been lusting for power, more greed, more power. And yet they claim that it's the Republicans that are doing it.
Right.
Anything they blame Republicans for, they are absolutely doing themselves.
Right.
So there it is. It's the same type of pattern.
Right. That's psychology 101. It's called projection. You say someone else is what you are, And that's what the Democrats do. They always project onto the Republicans what they actually are, and that's why. And then we, who can't put two and two together, just embrace the talking points from the Democrats. And, that's not sophisticated. That's not sufficient to be called a adequate voter, right? Just to pick up someone, to embrace someone else's talking points, no matter, irrespective of the fact that it's doing you harm. It's not doing you any good. So why are you doing it? It just doesn't make sense. So anyway, I hear the music. We're going to take a break. And when we come back from the break, why don't we you're open to taking phone calls? Are you open to,
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll take some phone calls when we come back from the break. And also I want you to address this anchor baby business. Can you address that? Okay, we'll be right back after a break. Thanks.
Spacious skies.
Are you a local business owner? Are you interested in increasing customer counts and store traffic, or increasing traffic to your website? If you answered yes, then you need to advertise on the Naked Truth Report. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to RJ Beaton at 818-517-KRLA. That's 818-517-5752. Or email us at rj@krla870.com. That's rj@krla870.com. Kathleen Wells, the host of the Naked Truth Report, wants to hear from you. Just like our borders, the phone lines, well, they're wide open. Call in at 866-870-KRLA. That's 866-870-5752. 866-870-KRLA.
heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self, yeah, country love.
I want that to play. We're talking about America the Beautiful. And you know why we're talking about it? Because so much is surrounding our Constitution, our country. America is our country, right? We're Americans. In fact, I was looking at a document the other day that said, you know, it was in 1832, colored Americans. Our ancestors thought they were Americans. They didn't think they were Africans. They thought they were Americans. So much is revolving around America, the Constitution. Remember, let's see, the ACLU was pissed because Trump said, like, America 80 times at the State of the Union. What? The ACLU. And the ACLU, the American Civil, they call America in their name. Just think about that. And they're pissed because he's saying America 80 times. Well, the American Civil Liberties Union, how come they're not involved in this whole thing about civil liberties with Trump being spied on by the Obama administration to make Hillary president? I don't know. We're talking about America, the Constitution, which is important. This is what differentiates America from other countries, our Constitution. Right, Keith?
Yes, ma'am. And this is one of the things that the founders feared, and I fear. This is the most important thing to me. It revolutionized my thinking when I began to do my own research and began to study and read for myself. This is why it's so important that we read. The reason we have a low literacy rate in our nation is because of the lack of reading our founding primary documents, I believe. And the reason I say that is because some of that stuff is pretty tough. It's pretty tedious. You have to actually sit down and meditate and think about what you're reading. Mm-hmm. And that's challenging for some people. But it takes a discipline, and I think that it's so important that the Constitution, especially this part of the 14th Amendment I wanted to share with you, and you can find this, everything. I want to identify my source, and that's important. The original intent of the 14th Amendment was done by a senator, at the time, 1868. It was the same senator who helped to get the 13th Amendment. Senator Jacob Howard helped to get the 13th Amendment passed, the end of slavery. Mm-hmm. And just after the end of slavery, when the 13th Amendment was passed, the Democrats responded in their typical way. Since they did not sign, only about 19 of them signed on with the Republicans to abolish slavery. So the reaction, of course, response by the majority of the Democrats at that time was to, further oppress blacks in their citizenship and their natural right to life, liberty, and property. So in other words, they were not allowed to vote. They were not allowed to do these things that other citizens could do. So they had to now come up with the 14th Amendment. And in the 14th Amendment says basically all persons, in the 14th Amendment, all persons, notice they use the word persons. That's very important. They didn't say we were 3/5 human. They said all persons with a capital P, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. Now, that word jurisdiction is another word to underline. That's very important. Jurisdiction means authority under which you are subject. They are subject. They were brought here. Think of it. Our ancestors were brought here illegal, or not. They were brought here by force. We say illegally, meaning
involuntarily.
Yeah, involuntarily.
Yeah.
The reason I sometimes go back and forth, and just so that your audience knows, I like to associate natural law with human law, and I like to compare the two, like Dr. King did. But anyway, I digress. Going back to this, so jurisdiction is talking about they were under the jurisdiction of Great Britain, because Great Britain was in charge of slavery. The Parliament, they were the ones, and the King, they would not allow the founders to abolish slavery. And that was a fact that people should remember before the Declaration of Independence, which is why they Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. He put in the first draft a condemnation against slavery and the king, but then it was omitted. It was not allowed. It wasn't because he decided not to, because he's a racist. No, it's because the racist South that he was, subject to. He wasn't a dictator. They decided not to put it into the Declaration final draft. So that is very important for people to know. But he, as well as other founders, were against slavery. It's just that they could not abolish it or get it abolished with their power.
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson had slaves, though.
Yes,
he wasn't that much against it.
They were growing up with slaves. Slavery was already, well in fashion before they were even, they grew up in the household with slaves. You see, the founders inherited slaves from their parents and so forth. And of course, they were under, again, British rule. So jurisdiction, that's important. Before the United States broke away from Britain, they were under the jurisdiction of Great Britain. So it says here, jurisdiction. They became the United States, and they said all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. Now, the people who come here, break into the country illegally, without permission, are under the jurisdiction of the country that they left. So they're not under our jurisdiction, but yet they're allowed to live here and stay here. I think that's the biggest mistake that our present politicians have made. And that's why you were correct when you said the black community has been pretty much wiped out. We become obsolete. Like one of my favorite episodes in The Twilight Zone, the obsolete man. He is obsolete because the state actually rules. The state is actually sort of, let's put it this way, they are like slaves of the state. I'm talking about the people who come here illegally. They have no liberty, really, no freedom, even though it's a false freedom they think they have. But no, they're under the jurisdiction of the state, which means they don't have the kind of freedom that we have to be as citizens.
What do you mean they're under the jurisdiction of the state? You mean the state in which they live?
Yes, the state, under the state. It's a complicated thing, but I'm trying to say that they're still under the jurisdiction of the country that they have fled from to come here. They're not until they get permission. But see, they're not getting permission because the state is not doing this constitutionally.
Yeah, but they're under, I think that they're under the jurisdiction of the United States because if they get a parking ticket, they have to pay it.
Well, yes, that's true. But I mean, it's like maybe a diplomat, when diplomats come and they're not really under our laws, they're under the jurisdiction of diplomats. I mean,
they have diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, they have immunity. Now, our politicians here are treating them as if they have immunity. The illegal aliens. Yeah,
because they are under our jurisdiction in the sense that, I mean, this is just my interpretation, because if they can be arrested by ICE. So that's being under our jurisdiction.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, it's not, they can be arrested. The reason they can be arrested by ICE is because they're not under our jurisdiction, because they are here illegally, period. So they're not under our jurisdiction, though.
Okay, let's take a phone call, Keith.
Sure.
Okay, Robin, hi from Claremont. Hi, Robin.
A great show. I am one of Keith Hardine's great fans and have really enjoyed the talk about the Constitution this evening. But Keith, I have a specific question for you. The ACLU and also just our court system basically grants illegal aliens coverage under the Constitution. What is the argument there? What's the best argument to use that they are not subject to our U.S. Constitution?
I think the one that I just made about, it's in the 14th Amendment where it talks about jurisdiction. The word jurisdiction, ask them what that means. If they're going to, okay, so we go back to what we were talking about earlier when we said that some people will interpret the Constitution as a living document, meaning that it can be changed at the whim of any public official. And that's what's going on today because of relativism. They're changing it to meet whatever standard they want it to meet. A judge, that's why a judge would not say anything about Obama. I mean, making DACA in the first place, which is unconstitutional. But then when Trump tries to abolish DACA, he says, "Oh, you can't do it." But it's not in the Constitution. It's not. The separation of powers puts the authority in the hands of Congress, not the president. As far as who comes here, I mean, in terms of making law, the immigration law. Does that make sense?
No, but the Supreme Court, for instance, let's take the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court has case law that establishes how that 14th Amendment will be interpreted. So the courts use like stare decisis. They use previous cases and precedents to decide how an interpretation of the 14th Amendment. So the Supreme Court has decided that the 14th Amendment just doesn't apply to the direct descendants of slaves, which is how it was originally intended, but now it applies to homosexuals and midgets and transgender folks and illegal folks. They've expanded. The Supreme Court has done that. So the Supreme Court, and that's
order too. They can be out of order.
Well, yeah.
Dred Scott.
Right.
The black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect.
Right.
Okay. And what happened with the gay marriage law? Where is that in the Constitution? Where's abortion?
Right. That's why they're expanding. The Supreme Court. This is why we have these Ruth Bader Ginsburg and that these liberal Supreme Court justices that are interpreting, and this is why it's important to stack the court conservative so that it will be strictly construed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I answer Robin's question? No, I don't know.
Robin, did you get your question?
Yes, that helped, Keith. So just the jurisdiction elements of the 14th Amendment when you're arguing with someone that illegal aliens are not protected under our U.S. Constitution.
Right. And I have another argument, too, which I'll talk more about later. I guess, I like to go to the next ad hoc committee. But you see, the thing is, if you go to Article 1 in the Constitution, it takes too long to explain, but it talks about the law of nations. There is a phrase, there is a clause in the Constitution that talks about Congress shall have power to punish offenses against the law of nations. And I studied that. The law of nations means the laws of nature applied to nations. That's what they were talking about when they wrote that clause in the Constitution. Again, the laws of nature apply to the laws of nations, meaning nations have sovereignty, just like individuals have certain sovereignty. But nations, the sovereignty of nations should not be abandoned. Our nation's sovereignty has been abandoned because we can't make our immigration law. In other words, when I say we can't, we already have laws on the books that they won't enforce, and that places like California refuse to enforce along with ICE. They refuse to cooperate. So that is a direct violation and borderline treason against the laws of nations.
Well, I'm convinced that the Democrats hate America, and I think that was indicative by the State of the Union and by the ACLU, who has America in their name, saying Trump used America too much. Let's take a call now from James, who wants to talk, in Inglewood, who wants to talk about anchor babies. Hi, James, line 2.
Yeah, Keith, this is James. You gotta remember all right. You gotta remember in the 14th Amendment, they gave I think indentured servants and blacks the citizenship. If you look at it, the Native Americans didn't get citizenship to the Snyder Act of 1994. So how could anybody else, if the Native Americans were here long before us, they should have been got citizenship. And they also in the drafting of the 14th Amendment, they didn't want to give citizenship to diplomats that came here, nor Native Americans, because they were sovereign. They were sovereign, and they didn't pay taxes.
Right.
And also, let's look at the 15th Amendment, which gives us the right to vote.
But so you're saying, did you just say that Native Americans should have gotten citizenship before us?
No. What I'm saying is, if you're going to give the illegal alien citizenship and everybody else citizenship, the Native Americans were here long before everybody, right? You say that.
Yeah.
So when the 14th Amendment came into play, that anybody born in America, American citizens, right? Well, why do we have to have a 1944 Slight Act? Go look it up. That gave them citizenship. And then if you look at the 15th Amendment, the 15th Amendment guaranteed us the right to vote. So we didn't need no Voters' Rights Act. And then women, then they said, women, some other amendment gave women the right to vote. So and then how would the 15th Amendment apply to everybody? Now all of a sudden the 14th Amendment applies to everybody, but then women had to get an amendment to have the right to vote. Don't make sense.
Right.
What he's saying.
Yeah.
I got some. This is part of the original document. It's online. Anybody can find it. But it talks about this. Listen, babies born to illegal alien mothers within the United States border are called anchor babies because under the 1965 Immigration Act, they act as an anchor that pulls the illegal alien mother and eventually a host of other relatives into permanent U.S. residency, not citizenship, but residency. So that's like the jackpot babies, or it's kind of like the Trojan horse, But that does not make them citizens because the babies are born here by mothers who enter the country illegally.
But
that's what needs to be once again emphasized.
Well, no, I mean it needs to be decided in the Supreme Court. I don't know if it has definitively because they say anchor babies are U.S. citizens.
Well, again,
that's because like
it's not that it hasn't been written into the books, into the Constitution, or in the
there really has not been a Supreme Court decision on anchor babies.
Right.
And what you need to have, we need to have Dr. Eastman come on. That's a constitutional lawyer from Chapman College. He'll explain the 14th Amendment. He'll explain jurisdiction, just like when you go to a foreign country, you're under their jurisdiction for its driving, all their laws. But you're not on their welfare system. You're not in their jurisdiction on their welfare system. You're not under their jurisdiction if you have a baby there.
That's right.
So we, like I said, we're the only ones on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
Right. And
I love Ann Coulter because Ann Coulter, every time she speaks, when they talk about these anchor babies engaged, she said the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment belong to Black America, not African Americans.
Right.
Black Americans.
I agree with you.
I'll tell everybody about this African American thing.
No, I don't like that either.
I have friends from Nigeria.
Right.
One day we sitting talking. I asked them a simple question. I said, "Are you guys considered African Americans?" He said, "Yes, James." No, we're not African Americans. We're Nigerian Americans.
Right.
African Americans don't know where they came from.
Right. Well, I mean, each country, people, like if you're from Ghana, you're a Ghanaian, and you're not an African. You're a Ghanaian.
Anybody from South Africa that killed white South Africans, that killed blacks, come to America, they're now what? African American. There's no distinction about what is an African American. There's no definition. What is an African American? There's no definition. Anybody come from Africa is an African American.
Well, I mean, if they're an American, but we don't know if they're an American.
No, what I'm saying, if you come
I understand what you're saying.
If you become an American citizen, you're now technically what? An African American, because you came from Africa. Now you're an American.
Yeah,
so
I got
that. Where did you come from?
I got
Africa.
that. Yeah, I got it. Thank you, James. Now we're going to take a call from Ernest in Los Angeles. Hi, Ernest.
Hello.
Hi.
I have a question for your guest.
Okay.
You've discussed quite a bit about the U.S. Constitution. Let's turn to the California Constitution. And can you say specifically, can a person that is not a natural-born citizen be the governor of the state of California? And I like to use that as an example for Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, Ernest, you answer your own question there. You know as well as I do that that's no. The answer is no.
So his governorship was totally illegal.
Yeah, but again, see what I said in the beginning of this talk. I said that our public officials, the biggest problem is they have rejected and abandoned, and you hear me say this all the time. They have abandoned the original intent, the original meaning of our primary founding documents. They have abandoned the founding principles, and so they are adding on to it their interpretation, their understanding. They've changed the meaning of words. Now, progressives do that all the time, and that's what we're fighting. That's why this is a war of ideas. Is a revolution against the ideology of progressivism, socialism, Marxism, humanism, relativism. Okay? But you answered your own question. I mean, it's true. No,
I wouldn't say that they changed the interpretation of the Constitution. They just flat out violated the California Constitution.
Well, think about it. What did they do? And you probably, Ernest, you know this, I think, better than I do. But remember when Governor Brown, he was governor how many times?
He's 2 times now.
Yeah, but he's not supposed to be. Technically, with some technical glitch or something, some law they changed, and he got a chance to do a 3rd term, I guess. He's only supposed to do 2, like the president.
Yeah.
You got that, Kathleen?
Oh, I hear you. Okay, we have 1 more minute, and I want to thank you for calling in, Ernest. And thank you, Keith. Don't hang up yet, but I want to encourage people to subscribe to my YouTube channel because, I'm going to be talking to that ICE representative, the community relations representative at ICE. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel at the Naked Truth Report, and you can follow me on Twitter at Wells Kathleen. That's my last name first, Wells Kathleen, and also join the Naked Truth Report's Facebook page. Thank you, Keith, for being a guest on the Naked Truth Report. I really appreciate it. You talking about the Constitution. We'll have you back on, okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. This is my love song to all truth warriors and mythbusters out there. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks. Together,